given that double by-election victory for the Labour Party, with the general election just a few months away, are you ready for a Labour government? Apparently voters in Wellingborough and Kingswood are, but we want to hear from you wherever you live on 0344 499 1000. Well, next, joining me now is former Northern Ireland Secretary. There's something, sorry about that, I just misread my screen. Former Northern Ireland Secretary under Tony Blair, Sean Woodward. Sean, that is one of the problems of live TV. Sometimes you get a bit discombobulated. But I'm very pleased that you're joining me.
Good morning.
Look, you will be delighted, I would think, by these two by-election victories. Is this the Labour Party on course for a landslide?
Well, nobody should be complacent about the British public and how they're going to vote. But I think looking at these results, and they're not just bad for the Conservative Party. I mean, they are, I think, quite close now to terminal. And if this is terminal for the Conservative Party as the government, then it would follow that the public are very likely to elect a majority of Labour MPs at the next general election. This is undoubtedly a damning indictment of the current government. And I think probably that's the most important thing to read from this, because we are certainly 9 months or so out from a general election, maybe 10. And when that comes, are they going to give the Conservative Party another look? And it's sort of beginning to look like there's a very strong pattern here. And when you see, as in Wellingborough, the biggest fall in Conservative turnout almost on record, you really get a sense that basically there is nothing now that Rishi Sunak can do that's going to allow the public to say, oh, well, we'll give them another chance. And that, of course, will mean that there will be a change of government.
Well, if there is a change of government, of course, the Labour Party will come in with their leader, Keir Starmer. They won't have been in government for 14 years. They've got some former senior independent ministers from the last time they were in government, but they have now started talks with civil servants about their programme for government. Do you know how those talks are going? And in your experience, having been a very senior cabinet minister yourself, do you know what plans they have?
Well, at the moment, what's really important is that these conversations take place. Again, we don't know what the outcome of the general election is going to be, but if there is a change of government, it's extremely important that the civil service has had a chance to have a look at the kind of things that the Labour government is proposing they would do if they form the government, how those would work in practice, so that we avoid the sort of shambles that took place when Liz Truss became leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister, when she suddenly plunged the country into the most desperate position by forcing policies onto the civil service, which didn't add up, didn't work, and cost the country nearly £100 billion. So I think this is about good planning. And at this stage, what the civil service will be doing is looking through the outline proposals that the Labour Party is making. We haven't yet got a final manifesto, so we're not in a position yet, as it were, to suggest that the civil service is looking at things that the country is not. What's happening here is familiarisation on both sides and outline proposals. And those are what's now in play, and that's just being very prudent on both sides, both the civil service and on the part of the Labour Party.
And in terms of what we do know, I read in the Times today that one of the firm proposals from the Labour Party in their first 100 days is to have a full fat shake-up, as they describe it, of the country's employment law. Some things they're proposing I actually agree with, like the right to switch off. I think my family would be delighted if I stopped checking my phone on holiday. I don't actually think that is a bad idea. But they've also said that in their first 100 days, they want to make it easier for trade unions to call strike action. And the CBI has come out in the Times today and said, this is of concern to our members. Do you think it should be a priority for the next Labour government to make striking easier for trade unions in its first 100 days?
Well, what I think is absolutely essential is that trade unions are given a proper place at the discussion table. What we've seen under the last years of this Conservative government has been an erosion of the voice of people who are extremely hardworking to be heard. And it seems to me that the sensible thing in any employment practice is to ensure that all voices are heard. And you, Jacob, put on the table, this is about striking. That is the unfortunate thing that happens when talks completely break down. But I think what Keir Starmer is indicating here is that what we need to do is to get back into a place whereby everyone's talking to each other and removing this adversarial way of getting through the day. I mean, what's so, I think, lamentable about so many of the problems that the government is currently navigating, and the health service is a very good case in point, has been the breakdown in trust between those people delivering the health service and the government which is funding the health service. And that seems to me to be utterly lamentable and entirely avoidable. But it does begin with genuinely saying we need to be in dialogue, not monologue.
But the government is in dialogue with the junior doctors, but they want over a 20% pay rise. The money just simply isn't there. It's not that the government, I mean, maybe the government is philosophically opposed to giving them an over 20% pay rise, but if we have a Labour government, the money's not suddenly just going to be available to the NHS to immediately give striking junior doctors a 20% pay rise. And this proposal, not my proposal, it's a proposal by the Labour Party front bench, will make those strikes more likely and more frequent and make it easier for them to go on strike, unless any government, whether it's Labour or Conservatives, is immediately going to bend to that 20% demand from junior doctors.
I think, Jake, if we did a brief little analysis of the words used in your question, then you would see exactly what I mean by the project effectively has become adversarial rather than collective and in discussion. And what really matters here is that we take a step back from actually thinking that everything has to be a battle. The reason that junior doctors have got into this position is that they are not as well paid as they should be. But we also need major reforms inside the health service. The problem the government has got is that nobody trusts them inside the NHS. And if you want a verdict on do you trust this government, go back to the by-elections yesterday. And I think one of the most telling things that for me came out of some of the commentary from yesterday were Conservative MPs reporting that on the streets where those by-elections took place, former Conservative voters in 2019 were simply saying, what's the point? And that's the problem. And you now get back inside the health service, doctors, nurses, everybody feels with this government, what's the point? And when you have millions and millions of people in the UK on waiting lists, some waiting more than 12 months for treatment, you have to say at some point, let's stop blaming the doctors, let's stop blaming the nurses, let's actually have a look at how this government have conducted themselves. And when we see, for example, the sort of scandals that happened during COVID, when individual Conservatives benefited themselves by the sale of PPP equipment, it was absolutely monstrous. And yet, who was taking responsibility inside the government for those practices?
Well, Sean, I don't think anyone's blaming doctors. I was asking you specifically about their pay demand. I don't think they're going to change that pay demand. But thank you very much for joining us. It was a great night for the Labour Party. You got a brilliant result, and you, quite rightly, I'm sure, will be celebrating with your Labour colleagues at some point today. But thank you for coming on. That was really interesting.